Hi, everybody. Good evening and welcome to EduTALK. This is Black History Month, and we are talking about some issues that are affecting our communities. Good evening. And as we start off the Black History Month, let's wish everybody happy history. I wish that we would incorporate Black history more in American history and world history, because Black history, history of Black people is everybody's history. And you have white history, Black history, everybody's history. We need to pull it together and call it history. The history of a people who struggled for so many years compared to the history of other people who have struggled too, but in different ways. And today we're talking about the immigration crackdown and its impact on educational communities right across the US and by extension the Caribbean. When we look at immigration crackdown, we're not getting political. We're looking at the effects of these procedures that are taking place in the country, as well as how it impacts the society outside of the US. Immigration crackdown can include increased deportations and the removal of sensitive location projections in 2025. Just the other day, have significantly impacted education, leading to chronic absenteeism, declining enrollment, and severe anxiety among students, including US citizens. And the fear of family separation caused distractions, reduced academic performance, and low test scores for immigrant children. And we can go on and on about the impact negative, which is chronic absenteeism, emotional distress, academic decline, long-term consequences, and so on. But when you look at the school and the staff that this is affecting also, we look at staff strain, because many teachers report increased classroom disruptions, and it leads to support traumatized students, enrollment decline, safety protocols. And then when you look at the legal and the policy aspects of it, we look at end of sensitive locations protection. And this means the removal of policies restricting immigration enforcement near schools has increased and leading to higher levels of fear. And then we look at also privacy rights. You look at the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, the FERPA, and this generally prohibits schools from disclosing student information without consent. So these things are very important, protecting people's privacy, and they're becoming eroded by the present situation that we find ourselves in. So we do need to look at it. So let's look at before I invite and introduce my dear friend and colleague here, Dr. Noel Gordon. Look at some statistics here from 2018. There's some statistics. 2018, the U.S. immigration enforcement policy and its impact on teaching and learning in the nation's schools. And from the abstract of this study coming out of UCLA, California, from 2018, educators from more than 730 schools across 24 districts and 12 states participated in a survey on the impact of immigration enforcement on teaching and learning in the nation's schools. Most of these schools were Title I schools serving disproportionately low-income students. Threats to students and their families make a challenging situation even more so. Data are provided for 3,500 respondents. Many hundreds of respondents report to this investigator that their immigrant students, whether they are US born or not, were terrified that families and friends and occasionally they themselves would be picked up by ICE, that it was at times very difficult for students to learn and teachers to teach. 90% of administrators reported observing emotional and behavioral problems among immigrant students. 2/3 of respondents also reported that the fear and concern for classmates was affecting the education of students who were not targets of enforcement. More than 1 in 7 respondents from the South reported that concern for classmates was affecting their students extensively. Respondents described the students' worst fear being left alone or left to care for their younger siblings and not knowing how they would survive. Many respondents reported that family members of their students had been reported that these incidents were well known to the whole class or school community, reinforcing fears many students held about their own situations or those of their friends. So, some educators also reported students suffering deprivation because one or both parents had been deported or lost their jobs due to their immigration status, and there was not enough money to buy food or basic need. And so this report, if you want to look it up, it's the UCLA Civil Rights Project report from 2018. So this is significant for our students and our schools. So we're not being political here. What we're talking about is the need to look at the situation with different lens and see that families and educational opportunities for students, even US born citizens, are being affected by immigration crackdown. And then why we're sharing this in a non-political way is to look at remedies, find remedies to help and be human to other humans. To be human is to look with compassion, even in the midst of policy and laws. It's nothing. Policy and laws is nothing. It is inhumane if we do not take the side of being compassionate and being human to other people. So we're not being political, we're just being human and having humanness, operating on a human level, and see if we can find measurable means to protect the country, and also look at international laws, look at our own laws and constitutional rights, and then see if we can treat everyone with dignity and wholeness as human beings. Here to discuss with us is our ESI academic chief, the chief academic officer, Dr. Noel Gordon, and he is tuning in because he has been in education for a very long time, over 30 years, and I've seen several changes in policies and educational experiences with our families. So welcome, Dr. Gordon, as our guest this evening. Not new to EduTALK by no means, so welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Dice.
What, what are you seeing on the ground though when you look at, well, let's talk about policy first of all. When you look
Yeah,
at policy
yeah.
with in terms of immigration crackdown and the impact on our education system and the people, what are we saying?
First of all, I'd like to, thanks for having me. I'd like to clarify that these policies are not education policies, but they are producing
Hmm.
system-wide education effects across the Caribbean because we have to speak in the Caribbean context, you know.
Okay.
One of the main things, I think maybe three main things are impacted here. The first one is the disruptive student mobility and planning. For decades, Korean education planning has been closely tied to migration pathways, as you know, and the increased uncertainties now means that students remain longer in their local secondary schools and their tertiary systems longer than they had planned, and late changes in post-secondary pathways also impact the population, and the decisions are made in families and with institutions in the Caribbean. Greater volatility in enrollment, especially at the upper secondary and first year tertiary levels.
Hmm.
So this is a direct impact on our education system in the Caribbean.
So it's not
Second thing,
just locally,
no,
it's going worldwide. And when you look at even international students too,
yes.
yeah, these policies are affecting them as well. Yeah,
Oh,
continue.
you're so correct. So let me broaden let me
Yeah.
broaden the base. It's really global. there's also increased pressure on domestic and regional institutions. So
Yes.
as U.S. options become less predictable, Dr. Dice, demand rises for local universities, for teachers, colleges, and technical institutions. And regional institutions
Mhm.
will now have to absorb students without long-term capacity planning because they didn't really plan for this influx, and competition for limited seat housing and student services are affected. And the third impact here is students' well-being and school climate, because we have to talk about the social emotional impact. So migration uncertainty affects students even when they never leave the region.
Right.
Anxiety, disengagement, the loss of motivation tied to disruptive future, increased counseling and even pastoral care, and stress transmitted from their household, navigating stall reunification or income uncertainty, because this remittance money, that's
Mhm.
sent to the countries through Remitly or through Western Union, all of that is going to dry up because this the funding for tuition in most cases, most of that comes from abroad.
Yes.
The paying of the school fee, financing transportation, uniforms, examination. It is a big problem that we're facing.
Hmm. So, so the idea is that when whatever happens, as they say, what happens here affects everything else. It starts
Yes.
in the nucleus of
Yes.
America, and it spreads its way. And what we're seeing is that over the years is that America actually affects almost every country
Hmm.
around not just the region but globally, and it's something that we should be cautious about and take pride in, that now where America is concerned with leading global initiatives and so on, and pulling back from that, it's quite significant and dangerous when it comes down to education. I
Yeah.
was reading a report recently where China is actually enrolling more students now than ever before because of the good, topsy-turvy environment with education systems in America, and the international student status, where they're weighing their chances of getting a student visa to come study in the US, as compared to staying and studying in their own country. And the effect of that is that when we lock out people, when we shut the door on so many people with very high skills who would study in America and by extension probably stay and become an inventor, become an entrepreneur, become one of the more high skilled workers, that door is closed now. And so we're going to have to try to find ways and means to get around it, which will depreciate the value in our workforce.
Yeah, and this is the collateral damages, which is striking. So let me just, I want to talk a little bit about the risk and opportunities, and
Yes.
what educational leaders should probably monitor. There are three primary risks, I believe. One is a short-term strain on the education systems, as I alluded to earlier. Now, more students who will be traveling abroad, they're going to have to enroll in universities and other tertiary institutions in their own countries, so the competition becomes steeper. Inadequate support for students whose plans collapse mid-cycle. So there's going to be lots of students who their future seem to be challenged, and the growing inequities between students with flexible options and those without. So you find that there might be fewer students who will now have the opportunity to travel abroad and study because of their connections or because of their economic situation. So with these, there are some opportunities. There are some opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
So one of them, I know that Jamaica in particular, the last couple of years, we had this mass migration of teachers from Jamaica
Yes,
to the
yes,
United States and maybe from
yes.
other countries also. And they didn't know what to do because they couldn't afford to raise the salary according to them to the level where they attract them to stay. So this will cause a reduced out migration, and this may basically slow the brain drain. We'll have the chance to strengthen regional education pathways. When back in my day, Dr. Dice, we had three campuses of the University of West Indies. You have Mona that dealt with medicine in particular. You had Cayville that dealt with law, and then you have Trinidad where I studied. Actually, I studied at the St. Augustine campus for sciences and science and engineering, and it was so
Mhm.
locked down. These
Yeah.
days, I don't think you have to go to Cayville for law
No.
anymore.
No.
So it will sort of strengthen that collaboration and opportunities to align education more closely with local and Caribbean workforce needs.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that's a
Yes.
big opportunity.
Yes.
So it's not all lost. So let's just quickly, because I know we have limited time in this program,
Yes. Yes.
what education leaders should monitor around the Caribbean and around the world. Early indicators across systems may include sudden enrollment increases in senior secondary and first year tertiary cohorts. You also need to look for higher guidance and counseling referrals linked to migration uncertainty, mental health issues, increased requests for free relief or academic flexibility. So these give the governments across the Caribbean and the world to now go back to free tuition because they can't afford to go to college there,
Mm-hmm.
and they can't afford to migrate to the foreign countries. And some of the people in United States who had jobs who were not really fully straight, they now have to hide. They can't work. So the income stream is now cut back. And now we have the rising interest in regional and non-US articulation agreements. So we're going to have to start look to ourselves. We have to start look among ourselves. Ministries of education need to start to do a couple of things like recognize migration related uncertainty as an education planning variable that has to be
Mm-hmm.
factored into the planning.
Yes.
Coordinate with foreign affairs and diaspora offices to provide clear and timely guidance, and support tertiary institutions with short-term capacity planning. So short-term capacity planning. You don't have to look towards the 4 years or the 5 years, but what can we do to mitigate against the situation? Very
Yes.
quickly, for principals, schools and principals, to normalize dual pathway guidance counseling, local and vocational, and then think about international alternatives. So we have to sort of plan, hey, you might want to start it here, and then you continue as you move into the next country when the opportunity happens again. And we have to implement flexible academic transition and placement policies and strengthen the psychosocial support structure. I
Mm-hmm.
keep
Mm-hmm.
going back
Yeah.
to that,
Yeah.
Dr. Dice,
Mm-hmm.
because it's going to be a problem. And let me just mention again that for tertiary institutions, you have to basically prepare for higher domestic retention.
Mm-hmm.
So you probably going to have some students who will spend more years in your institutions than they had
Yeah.
planned to spend there. We have to expand regional articulations. The countries like the UK, Canada, and also online articulation pathways. We
Mm-hmm.
going to have to sort of
Yeah.
spend more time and interest looking at the online. We know we are doing it now, but be more
Mm-hmm.
purposeful, more intentional in some of the areas that we maybe original we weren't considering. And
Mm-hmm.
then lastly, in this segment, I want to just mention that we will have to strengthen career aligned programs to retain talent within the region. So
Yes.
we're going to have to come up with certifications. We have to collaborate with institutions, with industry, and get these certifications which are valid across the Caribbean. So we don't have to look to United States of America because, believe it or not, we think United States is a bed of roses. You have to come here. You have to work here for
Yes.
stereo, just
Mm-hmm.
like everybody else. And like we in the Northeast, we have to be out there. Well, not me,
Yeah.
you, Dr. Dice. I'm retired. I have to be, I have to be out there in the snow, and it's not easy. It's
Mm.
not easy to
Yeah.
educate in the United States of America.
But
But
even
go
it
ahead.
coupled with the idea that, you can walk out of your house and get scooped up, by one of these ICE agents. You
Even
can
though
get
you're
scooped up
legal.
even though you're legal. So one of the things that I started doing is to walk around with my passport card in my wallet so that I know I might be scooped up, but I have it on me as an identification document. It's challenging. And when I think of people, as you mentioned earlier on, I think of people who are coming in from outside of the US. They're working, they
Mhm,
have their families, they're trying to support their families, and then one of them gets scooped up for 1, 2, 3 days, and
mhm,
they're out of a job,
mhm.
and then they have to go fend for their kids, all because of this. It's very aggressive, a very aggressive way of detaining people and getting them to be in custody when there are other ways of doing this. There are other means of taking care of
Yes.
um, legal procedures
Mhm,
and
mhm.
policies to carry out practically. And so the thing that we want to really highlight is that there is a human way of doing things. And
Mhm.
where you mentioned the policy way of organizing regionally, because these things are happening, and the US, one way or the other, protecting itself from outsiders or insiders too, and these crackdowns happen. Regionally, countries have to start thinking self sustenance, self sustaining themselves. How do they get their people and their educational system
Mm.
to be very well operational so that they can educate their young people all the way up to tertiary institutions, and they have a viable way of putting people back in the workforce without sending them to other countries like the US to go through this type of mental stress and social strain on their own systems. So it's not just in America alone, but as you mentioned, regionally, we start thinking, how are we going to sustain this when you have a lot of aggressive crackdown on people and it's affecting their lives, the
You know,
lives of these people.
Dr. Dice, we are so on to a very important point because it's not all lost because
Mhm.
self-sufficiency is very important. Just recently, I saw something on social media. AI is so is so clever that you don't know what's real from what's not real. But I
Yeah.
saw something that indicated that St. Lucian prime minister was asked not to send the doctors to Cuba to train,
Yes.
etc.
Yeah.
So let's look at the bottom line for the Caribbean because we have to start doing things. CARICOM, we have to wake up. And so
Yes.
understanding that we have great numbers and we have very smart people. We have more Jamaicans in the United States than live in Jamaica. People come to seek opportunities. And we can create those
Definitely.
opportunities in the Caribbean. So U.S. immigration policy shifts are reshaping education realities across the Caribbean,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of its intent.
Yes, yes, yes.
So students remain longer in local systems than planned. That might be that's something that's going on in the short term. Late changes in post-secondary pathways and increased enrollment volatility, as I mentioned earlier, in the upper secondary and tertiary levels. But here's something that I'd like to mention that we're going to be experiencing: higher demand in domestic and regional universities, capacity strain without long-term planning, competition for seats, housing, and student services. Now, migration uncertainty affects students even when they do not migrate. And some of this I'm just reiterating
Yeah.
so that it can remain in our psyche. Anxiety, disengagement, lack of motivation, increased needs for counseling, pastoral care. All of these things are going to come into play, and we have to make sure that we are ready for this. So, as I mentioned, just reiterating the risks and the opportunities that I mentioned earlier: short term strain on schools and universities, mid cycle disruptions without safety nets, and widening inequities. And as I said, reiterating the opportunities:
Mm-hmm.
potential slowing of the brain drain, and we need to slow it down.
Yes.
The Jamaica Teachers Association or Teachers Associations around the Caribbean The governments might be breathing a sigh of relief right now. Okay, but you have to create opportunities for your educators,
Mm-hmm.
and make sure they get better salaries.
Mm-hmm.
Strengthening the regional education pathways. And I'm glad that ESI is playing a very pivotal role in that right now,
Mm-hmm.
because when we had our last professional
Yeah,
development, we
yeah,
had
yeah.
educators from 10
10
Caribbean
different.
countries
Yes,
participating. So
yes,
we are way ahead of the curve. And I
yes.
hope that we can be they can engage us,
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Dice,
Mm-hmm.
as we come to this very crucial point in our system, and better alignment between education and local workforce needs.
Yes.
So basically, that's it from my end, and it's not all lost.
No.
We have to learn to, just like the African diaspora, they're trying to come together with all the wealth and all the resources they have there. We have this taste for foreign stuff and
Yes.
all of
Yes.
that.
Yes.
Listen,
Yes.
I received a great educational foundation in Jamaica. I
Mm-hmm.
went to basic school, primary school, high school. I went to junior college in the Caribbean. I did my bachelor's degree at the University of the West Indies. When I came into the American system, it's a good educational system because it's not focused so much on the rote and memorizations that we used to do back then, but it's more on critical thinking. But it was really tough back there. Comparing, I just went through it. It was easier for me here. We have a great educational
Yes.
system
Yes.
back in the Caribbean and other
Mm-hmm.
countries around the world. We
Yeah.
need to look within ourselves and don't just see this as it's doomsday and oh my God, what's going to happen to us? As we always say, Miss Lou says, turn your hand and make fashion. Come on,
Yeah.
CARICOM,
Turn your
we
hand
can do
away.
it.
Yeah, that's what I usually leave people with too, walk good with Louis Bennett. But you're right, you're right. As we close down, I really want to thank you for coming on and sharing that with the regional effect and so on, and the impact that will lead to opportunities for our own people. And we have been preaching it like St. Paul, preaching it and telling people we need to invest in ourselves and not just money. You need to invest talents in ourselves. We need to invest our values back into our system because
Yep.
they work. Our value system and principles that we grew up on and believe in. You're talking about Marcus Garvey, the land of Marcus Garvey, the land of Stokely Carmichael from Trinidad and Tobago, the land of Louis Bennett, and all the people who have come before them. It's remarkable that we're discussing this in Black History Month. So I want to thank you very much. All I'm saying is find some humanness among us, find it in our hearts to treat people very kindly and to look at the dignity of each other before we start lighting their houses on fire, figuratively speaking. Look at ourselves. Thank you so much, Dr. Gordon. I will see you
Thank you.
soon.
All right, later.
Everybody, EduTalk has been on Tuesdays at 8 p.m. Please join us and let us know what you think about the show. Also, you really need to stay close to the news, stay close to everything that is changing. Read a book, find something to read. Write to us also at EduTalk, at EduSolutions intl@gmail.com. That's edusolutionsintl@gmail.com. Or visit our website at edusolutionsintl.org. This has been EduTalk. Walk good, everybody. We'll see you next week. Take care.